In this video, I'll be going over how I built the ultimate real estate AI agent using n8n. You'll be able to use this AI agent to find new residential or investment properties on the market and then evaluate them on a daily basis. Just like my previous AI videos, I'll first go over a demo of how this AI agent works, and then I'll build it from scratch so that you can apply it yourself. So starting off, this is how our real estate AI agent works. You can either click test workflow or wait for the schedule trigger to occur every single day, but I'll just go ahead and click test workflow here. It then uses the Zillow API to get market data, and it'll then update our real estate deals with all of the recent properties, either investment or residential, on the market for us to see. So we can see we have all the addresses, sizes, pricing, estimates, rent estimates. And if we scroll all the way to the right, our AI agent actually calculates KPIs for our property. So here we have our monthly cash flow, annual cash flow, cap rate, as well as cash on cash ROI. All of these metrics are used in a holistic way so that the AI agent can then send over a daily summary email called Daily Real Estate KPI Reports, where they'll first give market sentiments and then the top 3 properties by cash on cash ROI. They'll also show the top 3 properties by cap rate, properties with negative monthly cash flow, so ones we should avoid on the market, portfolio-wide averages, as well as recommendations on what to do next. So with this, our AI agent will essentially scan the market every single day and provide you a summary with the best residential and investment properties on the market within your area. And if a property does look appealing to you, either as a flip or a long-term investment, you can then head over into your Google Sheets real estate deals page, where it'll provide all of the intricate details of the property. Now, at a high level, this is how our AI agent works. So after the trigger, either manually or every single day at 9 a.m., we can first set the criteria for the types of properties we want to search for. So if I double click into this node, we can see that we're searching for Houston, Texas properties. And then the status obviously is for sale. And then for the prices, I set it to be between $300,000 to $400,000, denoted here by price min and price max. And then we also want 2 beds as a minimum, and we also want 2 baths as a minimum. And then finally, we want to sort this by price, and then we want these to be multifamily properties. So these are all expressions that we can hard code in. So if you wanted to search for other locations, all you would need to do is head over into this node, change Houston, Texas to the location of your preference, and then change your budget as well. And then moving on from here, we're using all of these details to feed to the Zillow API. So all we're doing is searching for properties that have this location, status, budget, beds, baths, sort selection, and if they are multifamily properties. And then after we get all the property details from the Zillow API, we then clean up the data. And then the next step here is where we'll actually calculate some of the KPIs used within our Google Sheets, as well as our analysis. So here we can see we're calculating out the cap rate, cash on cash ROI, as well as monthly and annual cash flows and the total expenses for the property. This essentially finishes all of our data gathering portions of the workflow, which will feed into Google Sheets so that our Google Sheets will always be updated with the latest properties inside our area. And then as a final step, our AI agent takes all of this data, analyzes it, and then provides a final summary in email, which they'll tell us what the best properties are for the day, what properties to avoid, and what properties to be on the lookout for. Now, before I start building this real estate AI agent from scratch, if you are interested in getting this template and using it yourself, or if you want in-depth guides on building real working AI agents and AI apps as a complete beginner, either for yourself or for other businesses, then make sure to check out my new school community in the description. So now moving on, let's actually build this agent from scratch. So as a first step, we want a trigger that will actually kickstart this agent workflow. So in our case, we'll do trigger manually just to show you how this agent does work. But obviously, if you want this to be running live, what you would also want to do is add in a schedule trigger so that this would run every single day. So inside the schedule trigger, you can set the trigger interval, which would be 1 day. And now that we have our 2 triggers, let's move on to actually getting the Zillow API. Now, at the time of this recording, there's no public access to the Zillow official API. What this means is that you need to submit a request to use their API, and it does take weeks to get approved. But in our case, we can use an unofficial Zillow API that you can find within Rapid API. So all you want to do is head over to rapidapi.com, and then under the search APIs here, just simply search for Zillow, and you can use any of their unofficial Zillow APIs. I like this one, so you can follow along and use the same exact API if you want. But again, you can use any of these unofficial ones. But I do like this Zillow because it matches up perfectly with our workflow. So right now I'm on the free plan and it gives you 30 requests a month. So that means that you can run this API request essentially 30 times every single month for free. So this way you never really need to upgrade to any of these paid plans. And even with the free plan, you'll still be able to run your workflows every single day for updated market data. Now, our next step here is just to look through the endpoint that we'll be using. So in our case, we want to search for properties within a target area. So we'll just use this first search for properties endpoint right here. so you can follow along if you want to. Here we have our rapid API key, which I will replace after this video is published so that no one can access this. But first, what we care about is the parameters. So this is basically how we're going to be filtering out our properties. So you can see that there's a query parameter for location, there's one for status, there's one for sort selection, listing type, is single family, is multifamily, is apartment, etc. Now this is important because we need to use the same exact naming convention inside our n8n workflow. So this is why we're first going through this endpoint, seeing how they're naming everything so that we can copy this over into our n8n nodes. Now you can follow along and use the same exact parameters that I'm using, or if you want to be a bit more tailored and specific, you can also add in some more that I'm not. There's over 63 parameters here. We're only using 5 to 7, I believe, but you can obviously include any of these that you want. And if you scroll down, there's some very specific parameters, like if they're single story, if they've had a price reduction recently, or if Zillow owns this property. So now that we know which parameters to actually search for properties here, we can head back into our workflow within n8n. Now this next node here is where we physically input all the different parameters we want. So the location, the number of beds and baths, and all the other things we saw inside this API. So let's add our next step here and we'll do set. So all we're doing is setting and adding fields to our data. Now inside the set node, let's go ahead and add a field. The first one, if we head back into our Zillow API, we want the location. So it's simply called location. So if we were to copy and paste this, let's copy that location and then paste it here. And then for the value, we'll just hard code the different types of locations we want. So in my example earlier, I did Houston, Texas. So let's go ahead and keep that same exact example. And now this is depending on what you want to search for. But in our case here, for our next one, we want only for sale properties. So I believe they use status as the name for this. So we can just simply copy and paste this status. And then we want for sale, because this is how they name the for sale properties here. But if you do want something like for rent, just simply copy and paste it the same exact way they have it named here. So no spaces with a capital R or recently sold. But in our case, we only care about properties that are currently for sale. Next, I've added in a minimum price as well as a maximum price. Again, if we head back into Zillow, if we scroll down, we can see that price min is structured this way: price underscore min, price underscore max. So this is the same way we're setting it inside our node here: price min and price max. Now I've finished and inputted all the different query parameters I want to search by. So we have the location, status, pricing, beds, baths, sort selection. So how we want to sort the properties, and then whether they're multifamily, we want them all to be multifamily properties. If you want to refine your searches a bit more, you can include any of these different parameters that they're showing here. So the HOA minimum, if you want to include that, whether it has a garage, whether it has a pool, you can include any of these parameters inside n8n. And then now to finish this out, let's test this step. And then these are all of these search parameters. So we have location, Houston, Texas, for sale, between $300,000 to $400,000, minimum of 2 beds, minimum of 2 baths, and we want to sort these by price, and we want these all to be multifamily properties. Now for our next step, this is where we can begin referencing the Zillow API here, and we'll use an HTTP request node directly within n8n. So let's go ahead and add a next step. Type in HTTP request here. And then now for the URL, all you simply want to do is head over into your Zillow. You can copy and paste this host. So zillow56.p.rapidai.com. So here I have https zillow56.p.rapidai.com. And then we also want to add the endpoint, which we're going to be searching through. So out of all of these, what we're going to be using is the /search endpoint. So all we want to do is just add in /search at the end of this. So now this is our final URL, zillow56/search ? And then we can input all the query parameters after. Now, before we add the query parameters, we need to add authentication. And this is where we get input our API key to actually be able to use the service. So inside authentication, go ahead and select generic credential type. And then we'll just use a header auth here. And I already have an account connected, but if this is your first time using it, just click create new credential. And then for the name, you want to head over into Zillow and then copy over the same exact name. So x-rapidai-key. And then for the API key, just simply copy and paste over your own personal API key as the value here. So now that we have our authentication done and the URL, what we want to do is add in all the parameters after the search function. So if we look back here, after search, we want to add in location, status, as well as all the other parameters that we set in this step before. So right below here, we'll just want to send query parameters, and then we can input all the different query parameters ourselves. Now this is everything we set in the previous step. So we'll basically use the same exact values. So the first one will be location, and then the value, we'll just simply drag this over. So the location is now Houston, Texas, but obviously this will change based on what you set in the previous node. So we'll do the same for status, drag over the status value under the name status. So now the status is for sale. So now I finished inputting all the parameters, and what you want to do is just make sure that this name exactly matches what you have as the name here, because these are tied to how this API inside Rapid API sets all of their query parameters. So we want to make sure that the name matches this exactly. So the name of location should be location like this. For the price, it should be price underscore min or price underscore max if you're using that. So heading back here, we have name, location, status, price min, price max, beds min, baths min. Sort selection is multifamily. So now when we test this step, it should now provide all of the properties within the Houston, Texas area that fits all these query parameters. Awesome. And then as we can see here, we basically have this massive set of data that's not really formatted well. But if we scroll down, we just have a ton of different addresses that have all of these different query parameters set. So you can think of this as just a massive data spit out of all the properties that match all of the fields we set here. So inside our set fields here, all we did was set all of our criteria. So Houston, Texas, as well as all the other property information. And then using this API, we're just outputting a ton of different properties that match this criteria. So now what we want to do is split out each of these properties into their own items. And then what we want to split out is just the results from the previous node. So drag over results, test this step. And rather than one item, we now have 41 items. So all this means is that from this HTTP request of finding Houston, Texas properties that match what we set here, we have 41 different properties. Now, as a next step, what we can do is format this data a bit cleaner. So there's a ton of different data points that we don't need. Like we'll never need to know the longitude of where this specific property is sitting at. We don't really need to know the time on Zillow, especially since it's not formatted correctly. If we scroll down here, we can see a ton of different other data points like should highlight. We do not care about that. We also don't care about the image source, at least for the time being. Now, if you do want to add in image URLs to your Google Sheets, then you can perhaps keep this in, but I'll leave this out since we want this to only be text-based. So what I'm just trying to get at here is that we can clean this data up a bit. So it's a lot more presentable to the AI agent. And this will also be a lot more presentable for our Google Sheets when we populate our spreadsheet with all these properties. So to clean up this data, let's just add in another node. So rather than split out, we'll call this edit or set fields once again. And then all we want to do here is just physically drag over all the fields that we want to keep inside this data set. And one other thing that I want to do is actually combine some of these data points. So we want one single field for the address. We don't want city to be by itself and then country to be by itself. And then if we scroll down a bit more further, we have the state all the way down here. Then we have the zip code somewhere over here. So what I want to do is just kind of aggregate this all into one data point called address. So let's go ahead and add a field here and we'll just simply call this address. And then the first data point here is the street address. So we'll drag this over. It says 13010 Unison Road. And then let's go ahead and expand this expression a bit. So right now, this is all we're showing, 13010. Then we'll click space because after the address, we then want the city. So let's now drag over city. So now it says Houston, click space once again. And then we want to drag over the state. Click space once again. So now dragging over the zip code here. So now this is a full address, 13010 Unison Road, Houston, Texas, 77044. And then just for a completion's sake, we can also drag over the country, which is USA. This way, we don't need to individually show the city, the country, the state, and the street address all in different fields. We can combine them all into one column inside of Google Sheets. Now that we have that, let's drag over the rest of the data points that we want to keep. So we care about whether the home status is for sale or for rent. So let's drag over home status here. And it'll automatically pre-populate home status. Next, we want to know what the home type is. So let's go ahead and drag over home type. And again, you can think of all these fields as all different columns inside your Google Sheets when you have all the property details at your disposal. So these are just all the data points that we actually care about. Next, we want the size of the property, and we can do the same thing we did with address and combine two different fields. So let's go ahead and add another field here and we'll call this size. And the reason we're doing this is because we have a lot area value field and then we have a lot area unit. So what we want to do is combine the value and the unit. So if it's 3,000 square feet, it would be 3,000 space square feet. So value space unit. So in our case here, if you drag over value, click space, and then drag over unit, it'll now read 0.5 acres. And the reason we're doing this is because sometimes Zillow lists properties as acres and then sometimes they do it as square footage. This way we'll be able to capture both of them all into one column inside our data sheet. Next, we want to care about the price because this is probably the most important metric for properties. Let's also drag over this tax assessed value as well that Zillow provides. And then we can also drag over the Zillow estimate, which I believe is their estimate of what the house is currently worth. And then if you do plan on renting your property out as an investment property, you can drag over the rent Zestimate, which is Zillow's estimate for what you can charge on rent. And then we also want to know price reduction of the homes. So for this example here, the price was reduced by $10,000 on April 16th. So let's go ahead and drag this over. Now, the reason why this is red is because not all properties have a price reduction. So if it's red here, all this means is that sometimes this value will be null. And that's because some properties never have a price reduction. Next, we want to know the number of bathrooms and bedrooms of the properties. So we'll drag these over respectively. And then we have some final checks like is non-owner occupied. We can drag over the pre-foreclosure, whether it's a premier building, and then whether it's a showcase listing. So now let's go ahead and test this step. On the left-hand side, we have all of these different types of data points here, but now on the right-hand side, we only have the most important data points. So we have the address all neatly formatted. So again, this just combines the city, country. If we scroll down, it also combines the state, the zip code, and then the actual street address here. So now we have this all in one neat formatted field. We have the home status, home type, size, price, tax assessed value, estimates, price reductions, if there were any. As I said here, this will be null. So that's why this showed up as red as undefined, because this will be null for a lot of properties. But if we do scroll down, we can see that some of these will have a value for the price reduction. So we can see this one was reduced by $10,000 on March 3rd. But again, on the next property here, it'll say null. So the reason why this was red was just because the very first property inside our JSON output was null. That's why this is technically undefined. And then again, if you do care about any of these other fields, just simply drag it over and it will show inside this output section. And with this, we essentially have cleaned up data for all 41 of our properties that meet this criteria. Now to finish off our data set, all we want to do is add in some final financial metrics and KPIs to be able to assess the values of the properties. And the way we would do this is with a custom code node. And this is where we can input some custom JavaScript code to be able to calculate things like cash on cash ROI and just total expenses and values. So just go ahead and add a code node here. So type in code. Now this is super simple. If you don't know how to write JavaScript code, just literally copy and paste this entire JSON input from our previous fields. So this has all of our data points, and then feed it over to ChatGPT and then have it create simple JavaScript code for you that calculates key metrics that you want. Now, if you don't want to do all that, just simply copy and paste my code here. So what ChatGPT wrote for me is for some constants, they're assuming 20% down on our down payments. They're assuming 5% APR, 30-year mortgages for loans, 1.2% property tax rate, 0.3% of price every year for insurance rate. But obviously you can change any of these that you would like depending on your geographic area. And then if we scroll down, we can see how we're calculating the down payment, closing costs, loan amount, monthly rates, number of payments, and mortgage payments. Then we have operating expenses and cash flow. Then we have returns on investment properties. And then here are the final objects to attach to the output. So that we have down payments, closing costs, loan amounts, mortgage payments, monthly property tax, insurance, maintenance, total monthly expenses, monthly cash flow, annual cash flow, cap rate, and cash on cash ROI. So it's basically calculating all of these financial metrics and KPIs from first our data set on our previous steps. So all of the actual prices of the homes and estimates. And then it's also assuming all of these as well. So down payment percentages, closing costs, APRs. Now let's go ahead and try to test this step. And all this code node does is take our data here and then add in those metrics I just showed you. So all of these stay the same. We still have the address, home status, home type, size. But then if we scroll all the way down, this one ends at showcase listing. But then after showcase listing, all we're doing is calculating the down payment of the home. So this is 20% multiplied by the purchase price, closing costs, loan amount, mortgage payment, monthly property tax, insurance, maintenance, the total expenses based on these three. We also have the monthly and annual cash flow figures, cap rate, and cash on cash ROI. So again, nothing is changing much inside this code node except for all of these metrics that we're calculating directly from our figures and assumptions. And with this, we have our data fully gathered for the next steps of our workflow. So now click on a new node and just type in Google Sheets. And then all we want to do is either append or update a row in a sheet. Now we don't want to select the append row and sheet because if you run this every single day, you don't want to keep listing the same exact properties. You want to just update the same properties with the latest details. So if the purchase price dropped, you wouldn't add another property inside your spreadsheet. All we would do is change the details of that existing property. So go ahead and click append or update row in a sheet. Next, all you'll want to do is connect to your Google Sheets account. So if you've never done this, click create new credential. and then go ahead and sign in with Google from here. After you're signed in, it should be able to see all of the different Google Sheets that you have saved on your account. So if you click into here, I should have my real estate one as the first. So we have real estate deals. And then now you can begin to define all the columns. So for the column to match on, we want this to be address because this is the only unique identifier for all of the properties. And then here's where we can physically drag all of the fields. So address matches to address. Home status goes to home status. So now I've gone ahead and dragged over all of the different values into the appropriate fields. And the way we're getting these columns is from my Google Sheets. So inside Google Sheets, what I did was just add every single one as a column. So we have address, home status, home type, etc. If we go all the way to the end, this is where it ends with our KPIs. So our last one is cash on cash ROI. So heading back into n8n, that's where we're getting all of these columns. So price, all the way down to cash on cash ROI. And now to show you how this works, this is completely blank. So then if we head over into n8n and click test step, this should now populate our Google Sheets with all of the new properties. So let's wait a second. And now we have all of the different addresses. Like I mentioned, we combined the street address, city, state, country. So this is all one field now. We have the home status, home type, size, price, etc. Scroll all the way through. We then have the financial metrics here, ending with cash on cash ROI. So with this step, every single day, our Google Sheets will be updated with the latest property details. And then to really round out this workflow, let's add in one more AI agent node. And what we'll do here is feed over all of the data points from our previous steps and have the AI agent produce a summary through email that will tell us what the best properties of the day were and what to look out for. Now we want the AI agent node to work concurrently with this Google Sheets step. So let's go ahead and drag over this last step right before Google Sheets, which is our code node. And this will output the 41 items with all the financial metrics. Now, because we're working with the AI agent node, we can't send over 41 items to the AI agent, or else it's going to run the AI 41 times. What we want to do is combine all of those back into one item before sending it over. So just type in aggregate here. And all this does is combine many items into one item. So inside our code node, we have 41 items. And then all we want to do is convert all of these item datas into one single list. So click test step. And then rather than 41 items from the code node, we now have one item that still has all the same information, but it's not split out. So as you can see here from a visual representation, we're taking the 41 items, populating it into Google Sheets, and then we're taking the same 41 items, combining it into one item. And then with this one item, we can finally feed it to an AI agent node that will be able to summarize all the findings for us. So for the prompt of the AI node, we want to define it ourselves. So click define below. And then for the prompt, feel free to copy mine or ask ChatGPT to craft you one yourself if you want to focus on specific metrics or details. But what I've written here is that you're a seasoned real estate investment analyst, and every day you'll be given a JSON array of property records. So these are all the different fields that the JSON includes. Again, these are the ones we defined ourselves. We took out all the useless information. And then next, I referenced the actual input. So all I did was drag over this JSON data, which is all the aggregated items into one single item. So let me just delete this and show you. If I drag over data here, we need to stringify this object. So just type in JSON.stringify. And then if we reference this JSON data, it'll now have all the information. So if you scroll down, these are all the properties that we referenced before. So 13010. If you scroll down, 2222 Pepper Mill, it's just all inside a string format. And then their task is to summarize the overall market sentiment in one sentence, identify the top 3 properties based on all the ones we got for the day. In our case, is 41. We want them to identify and list the top properties by cap rate. We want to call out any properties with negative cash flow, have portfolio-wide averages, and then recommendations for next steps. And then importantly, we want to format our output as a concise daily report with headings and bullet points. And then we'll add in this tool right after, but we want to use the Gmail tool to email the summary to a designated team member. And then we want to make sure that the subject is dated. So daily real estate KPI report for today's date, so that every single morning inside your inbox, you'll get all of the up-to-date information on new properties within your area. And then to finish this AI agent node, we need to first add a chat model to act as the brain to be able to generate the analyses, and then the Gmail tool to be able to actually send out the email. So first, for the chat model, we'll just type in OpenAI. But again, you can use any of these other AI models that you'd like. All you need is your own API key. And then for the model, again, this isn't too intensive, so you can do 4.0 mini, but I like using the newly released 4.1 mini, which is just as capable, but also cheap. And then next, we'll add 2 tools. The first tool is a calculator, and this makes it easier for the AI agent to calculate specific metrics if they need to. And then finally, we want to actually be able to send out this email summary to someone on our team. So type in the Gmail tool, and then the operation obviously is to send an email. So we can keep this the same. For the to, test@gmail.com. But obviously you change this to whoever you want receiving these emails. And then for the subject, you want the AI model to produce the subject for you. So let the model define this parameter. And then for the message, again, you want them to craft the message. So go ahead and let the model define this parameter as well. So this concludes our real estate AI agent, which will first use the Zillow API to get all relevant properties within our area and our criteria. It will then clean up the data, add in some more financial metrics, populate our Google Sheets with those metrics, and then at the end of the day, every single day, it'll send you a daily summary via email of all the best properties within your area and which ones you should look out for. Now, if you found this video helpful, make sure to like and subscribe for more content around building AI agents with actual use cases. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, if you do want this template, as well as in-depth guides and an active community on building AI agents and AI apps as a complete beginner, then click the link in my description for my new school community.